Thank you very much, Mr. Freire, for your wide range of explanation about the thought of Slavoj Zizek. Although it's not easy for us to grasp the result of your more than 15 years of research. So we do realize that the audience of this room come from diverse discipline and educational background. Some of them might be familiar with Žižek, while someone might be not. So at the start of this question and answer, please keep in mind that please be comfortable to pose different levels of questions. So whether you're not familiar with Žižek, please go ahead and be comfortable because we are coming from diverse background. So once again, thank you. We're now opening the section of question and answer. Please use the feature of comments and raise hand if you are able to. But if in case you're not familiar with Zoom, you can just open your mic so we can notice you. Mr. Hutauruk?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Am I heard?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you and good night, Mr. Freire, for your brief explanation. And now I'm maybe the first question for opening this Q&A section. Can you explain about Zizek's position in Marxism? Because you mentioned that Zizek is a contemporary heterodox Marxist. What is the real meaning of it? Thank you.
Well, as I thought, Zizek, he walks between three fields. In philosophy, he's a Hegelian. He's also a Lacanian Psychoanalyst. And his third field of debate is political. He's all time he's dealing with politics. As I told you, he's engaged with emancipatory politics. And in the field of politics, he's a Marxist. He always used Marxist critique of capitalism. Zizek, he's a philosopher. He's not an economist. So you'll not find in Zizek books discussion about economic problems. And even people sometimes ask Zizek to give some blueprints. Where do we go? How we go? Can you specify? And Zizek never can answer this kind of question because he's not an economist. Despite the fact that he usually speaks about many things, many fields, he is a systematic philosopher. He speaks about many things, in many fields, usually to exemplify, to illustrate his ideas. But he has a kernel. He's a systematic philosopher. He's a Lacanian, Hegelian, Marxist philosopher, and he never crossed this path, this line, and to discuss economy. And so you always, I think he is a Marxist. He's a heterodox Marxist because he has a different view of Hegel. He's an heterodox Hegelian, and so this results in a different reading of Marx. But I'm sure that that he agrees with Hegel's, with Marx's critique of capitalism. He has a great contribution in the field of critique of ideology. He brings Lacan to the critique of the ideology, and we know that when Zizek emerged, we were supposed to be in the 90s in a post-ideological era. The postmodernists always talk that ideology is finished. Foucault even refused to use this concept of ideology, and the postmodernists left always said, oh, what we can do is to resist power, but never tried radical change, because you know that postmodernists, they become horrified with the idea of dealing with totalities. no, with the big structure. And then Zizek comes and say, no, you cannot have emancipatory politics if you are not a universalist. No, Marx was a universalist, Hegel was a universalist, Zizek is a universalist, psychoanalysis is a universalist theory. We agree that all theoretical construction that you make, all thinkers make a theoretical construction that all has a historical dimension. We didn't construct our theory in abstract field. That is history. We use historical tools, but what the postmodernist doesn't accept is that we can reach the universal dimension even if you do this historically. But it's very interesting that Zizek answered this postmodern nominalism with he accepts the critique of universal normativity that postmodernists make. No, but he said that we must keep the idea of a negative universal, and emancipatory politics must engage with this universal negativity. And then we can think the totalities. So I think that he's a Marxist. He's a Marxist. But of course, as a philosopher, he's a Hegelian.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freire. Mr. Hotoro, do you want to follow that up with anything? All right, we're moving to the next question by Mr. Luis. Can you hear me, Mr. Luis?
Yeah, okay. First, I appreciate this lecture. First of all, I appreciate this lecture. Second, I want to ask you, Professor Marcelo, this is out of the context, but you can relate it also. In Lacanian, do you know the graph of desire? The graph of desire. I think this is similar with the Zizek's idea in the subject object of ideology. My question is, how to read this graph? Because do you know, of course, you know very well, for graph in Lacan. How to read this graph? Second, my question again is, how about psychoanalysis approach ideology?
The idea, Zizek's idea of ideology.
Yeah.
Oh, you brought the concept of desire. Sure, all this thinking, Lacanian thinking, is he begins from the subject of desire. They develop everything for this idea that desire is the essential kernel of man. And you know that if Kant and other philosophers, they begin by this epistemological subject, who want to know, who can know. The psychoanalysis begins by the desiring subjects. So everything in this field is born in this idea of desire. Well, about Zizek's idea of ideology, he knew, I think he made, you know, that the critique of ideology has many contributions from many Marxists, no? Adorno, Althusser, and now Zizek, all they made contributions, no? to the field of critique of ideology. The first thing is Zizek emphasized the importance to keep the concept of ideology, because, you know, according to Foucault, for example, we should abandon this concept. And first thing is because interesting, because Foucault and postmodern thinkers, they always talk about resisting to power. Is this a postmodern idea that you cannot think about the totality, so you cannot think about revolution. All you can do is some resistance to power. No, but Zizek says, but this is a very problematic, because this is a very modest and insufficient kind of thinking, because we should not, of course we resist to power, but we shall not only resist to power, we must understand that we have freedom. Hegel and Marx and Freud and Lacan was thinkers of freedom. So freedom is connected to revolution. If we are free, we can make essential, fundamental choices. No, and so to the postmoderns, we can only resist. But if you only resist, you never really change the paradigm. You never complete the dialectical process. Understand? So this is why Zizek keep the concept of ideology, and not only this power, the micro powers struggles. And the fundamental contribution of Zizek to the field of critique of ideology is the idea, is from the concept of real in Lacan. Zizek doesn't think ideology or as some kind of incorrect thinking. He focuses in the idea of ideology as some construction, some fantasy that conceals, that keep reading the real. Ou seja, ideology exists to conceal the strong antagonism that there are in reality. I was speaking about the connection between Kant and Hegel. Hegel said Kant antinomy are brilliant, are perfect. He saw that if you go to the extreme in the epistemological field, you finish. If you push reason to the extreme, you meet terrible contradictions. But the problem is that Kant understood this in an epistemological way. And so it was an escape, because Kant kept the incompleteness of the field in the epistemological field. We cannot know about being, about das Ding, but das Ding is there in its fullness. And what Hegel do, basically, the basic insight of Hegel is to ontologize Kant, to say, no, this is what you find, this incompleteness of your epistemological field is also an incompleteness of being in itself. Is an ontological antinomy, is an ontological contradiction, is something. Being is not full. Being is affected by the same self-relating negativity as human. No? And so this is why how Zizek reads the substance, not only as substance, but substance as subject. No? Being as substance and as subject. Or in other way, being is affected for the same contradictions that man. So what this means? That this is the dialectical idea. Dialectical is simply the exchange of perspective. Where you have antinomies, you are touching the real. You are touching the real. You're not simply in a big problem. You are touching the real. And so, what is dialectic? Dialectic is some supplement, exactly because you have reality is affected by this strong antagonism. Marx called this class struggle. No, we have social reality, social relations, social reality, and class struggle. And class struggle is a kind of antinomy in society, something that all time threatening to dissolve. Class struggle threatening to dissolve society. No, and so you have points in the society where there is more class struggle and strong conflict. Then you have this antinomy, this strong antagonism. And there still this antagonism, you have this field, this dimension of ideology. Ideology exists as a kind, Marx created this idea of ideology to supplement. He understood that reality is full of antinomies, of strong antagonisms, and dialect is necessary as a supplement to conceal. This is what dialect made. He make reality. You don't, by example, you never see. You can see, by example, in political struggle, you can see struggle, feminist struggle, anti-racist struggle, but what the class struggle. Okay? And so is a kind of the ideology serves to conceal the antagonism. So this is because ideology is a some level of spectral. Is some the ideology has always with specters, with monsters, with something that's not living nor dead. This is why, for example, you have a lot of this example in literature. No, I remember for example, Matrix. You watch Matrix. Matrix is a movie that is very good about critique of ideology. No? And I remember the scene where they were inside a building, no? And Neo saw what they call déjà vu. Remember this scene? He saw the cat walking 2 times, repeating the recurrence of the cat walking in a window. And he said, "Oh, déjà vu." And then everybody stopped it. Why? What did you saw? This déjà vu is like a kind of spectre, a kind of glitch, a kind of is a kind of symptom that something was changed in the matrix. No, recently changed. If you remember the movie, you know that the machines changed the design of the building to become a trap for Neo and Morpheus. And so something went wrong in this redesign, and then a glitch appears. And this glitch generates this specter, this déjà vu, this specter, this ghost, these monsters. And this is the point where ideology exists. Ideology is some kind of spectral, some kind of ghosts that appear where there is a glitch in reality, where the antinomy, the antagonism is too strong. So ideology exists to make the field plain and homogeneous. Zizek says, ideology exists to conceal the real, the traumatic dimension. Understand?
All
It's a
right,
very
thank you.
interesting idea.
So, Mr. Lewis, do you want to respond to that with anything?
Thank you for this answer. But I want to ask what last question, I think. About dialectics and paradox. Do you know? Is it the same thing with dialectic and paradox? Because in Hegel ideas, I think it's different. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Do you know? And
No,
yeah.
there are many readings of Hegel. As I told before, there is the Hegel of reconciliation, there is the Hegel of synthesis, there is the Hegel of overcoming the contradiction, no? The liberal Hegel, but this is not Zizekian Hegel. Zizek said that there are never reconciliation. Reconciliation maybe retroactively, but the dialectical process, the negation of negation, is simply a change of perspective. You look to reality in another way, by another way, understand? And then there was some loss, some contradiction, some loss, and you realize that this loss is the good news. This loss is some gains. Understand? This is to celebrate. So what the Hegel of Zizek is a Hegel that we never get rid of contradictions. We are always contradictory beings. Reality is always contradictory. For example, in Marxism, you can make a communist revolution. Maybe we can have economic in the society without contradictions, because you eliminate the bourgeois and the proletariat. Okay, you eliminate this contradiction. But for Hegel, Zizek always emphasized this. This is important for some Marxists, because some optimistic Marxists think that Marx promises us the field of happiness, the fullness. No, if you are a Hegelian Marxist, you realize that we never go beyond contradiction. We solve many contradictions, but we always have some fundamental contradiction. And this is not bad news, this is good news, because contradiction is the price we pay for our freedom. We only have freedom because reality is contradictory, because being is incomplete. It's like there is a chapter, there is always a chapter not written in being. And this is why we have subject. Subject must create this chapter, and the chapter there's always this lacuna. No? So contradiction is the price we pay for our freedom, and we must celebrate this. And what we must, what psychoanalysis offers, psychoanalysis cure offers the subject, that he, along a long way, he forsake the idea of overcoming contradiction, overcoming loss, no? and to reach the final object. No? We can think that capitalism, the basic promise of capitalism, is to overcome the contradiction, to overcome the loss, giving to you the ultimate commodity. It's commodity that you really will be this. You say you have this object and say, oh, this is what I always wanted. Now I'm happy. No, this is the promise of capitalism. Of course, this promise never is fulfilled. No? You always, it's because you buy a new car and you go out of the shopping. This car already lost 20% of his value. No, exactly why? Because you realize this car that you want so much is not that, is not the ultimate commodity, and now you are again unsatisfied or dissatisfied. Understand? So contradiction is Zizek's Hegel is a Zizek, or is a Hegel of unsurmountable contradiction. Of course, when I talk about contradiction in laws, I'm not preaching that all laws are good. No, it's not like masochist. Some fundamental laws, some fundamental contradiction. But of course, we are all time trying to reach this ultimate object, to overcome contradiction. We are always doing this effort. No? Psychoanalysis simply helps subject to live with contradictions.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Yeah, it's clear, and thank you very much for this answer.
Daniel, can I speak?
Oh, yeah. We're moving to the next question. Please, Mr. Prasenjit.
Yeah. Yes. Marcelo, it's an overall a very comprehensive perspective that you have given, which actually connects various disparate parts in Hegel. And going by Zizek's methodology of desynthesization of Hegel, Hegel's various fragments actually still requires a certain kind of psychoanalytic analysis. For example, the left Hegelian move, which is famously described in German ideology by Marx, which sort of projects the idea of revolution as something ahead of the time, ahead of the existing contradictions. But at the same time, it's not a spectre or a symptom, but it's a projection that arises from the material reality. But it is ahead of the present contradiction, as the left Hegelian move would like to direct you to. Now contrast it with the right Hegelian move. And the right Hegelian move would be arriving at an ultimate solution, or the final stage of the social evolution in terms of the realization of the absolute spirit. So if we take these two ideas, a projective understanding of revolution and realization of the absolute spirit, what Zizek does is to fill in this gap, the gap between the projective revolution and the realization of the absolute spirit. Of course, he fills it up through Lacan, who's a major source, but he also fills it up through Badiou, and even through other thinkers, contemporary thinkers, especially by speculative materialists who occupy a major space in Zizek's thinking. So what I see that this gap is widened by Zizek. Instead of closing the gap, instead of rebuilding a project of emancipation or revolution. I just place this for your consideration, and I want to hear you on this.
Well, as I see, Zizek is essentially committed to emancipatory politics, and he is a thinker that always emphasizes the idea that we really can make revolution. No, the revolution is really possible. This is the very important conception for Zizek. No, his critique of postmodern is exactly like I spoke before, that for postmodern you only can make some reformation, something like this, but capitalism is the ultimate reality. Zizek never said this. He was always against this. He thinks that we show make a fundamental choice. and we need to work in the universal dimension. That is, we must think about capitalism and think that if you want this, or if you want to really change the paradigm, and in the last years, Zizek is very clear that before, I don't know, but in the last years, I see that Zizek is clearly saying that capitalism is doomed. Is doomed due to ecological catastrophes. Is doomed of mental health catastrophes, and no. So he really understand that we must reach some communist revolution, but and man is able to make revolution. He has this very important concept of ethical act. The ethical dimension for Zizek is always revolutionary. No? When we do, as Lacan said, be faithful to your desire, this idea of desire in Lacan cannot be confounded with wins. No? This is an ethical category, and what Zizek means in his ethical commitment is to reach the dimension of the act. The dimension of the act for Lacan and for Zizek is all of the order of the real. The act is something that goes to the point of the maximum antagonism and change the real, change the paradigm. So Zizek say that we really can make revolution, but what Zizek never do is that he refused to give some blueprint, some map. We will do this next year. He's not an economist. He cannot give us practical economic measures. He led this to economists, but he thinks that we must go to a communist revolution. But he didn't specify this exactly because, as a Hegelian, he said this: we cannot fall in the trap of trying to think that we can preview future. Future for a Hegelian is always unknown, is always surprise. Né? He always repeats this: the all of wisdom fly only in the crepúsculo, né? That is, the philosophy comes after things happen. We cannot use philosophy to really preview how future will be. We must act, but this is not a recipe to keep to stop. No, I think we must act ethically, revolutionize, make a revolution, but we don't know where exactly we will go. Certainly, as a Hegelian said, everything that we will do will fail. Understand? But not fail in the sense that a total disaster. No, you fail because we always fail. This is the dimension of Hegel's fundamental inconsistency of being. Everything that we do is always inconsistent. We all fail, but we try to fail better. So I think Zizek is really committed with a revolution. His concept of human is revolutionary. I don't know if I answered your question, but okay.
So, Professor Prasenjit, do you want to respond to that with anything?
Just a second. Yeah, the answer is absolutely in the right course. Of course, I mean, your metaphor of the owl of Minerva that Hegel uses, who flaps his wings at the night of the world, the Hegelian metaphor, the night of the world. But one issue that arises is the driven by an abject object of desire. The abject object of desire, which is an absent object, which is a pure negativity, whether that can propel the idea of revolution. There seems to be somewhere a fundamental blockage in the progress towards revolution, because of realizing the goals of revolution. And there seems to be a gap between the subject and the object. So how do you suggest to fill this up without a scheme? That's what is the question.
Yes, I think I understand your question. No, Zizek, he following Lacan, we know that in the last instance, the ethic, in psychoanalytic ethic, the desire, if you cross fantasy, fantasy is this kind of paradigm to keep us unable to revolutionize. If you are under your unconscious fantasy, you can do many things, but you never make a revolution in your life, really, because this fantasy tell you how to desire. He gives you the horizon where you can go and then you cannot go, let's say. But the idea of Lacan is that you must cross fantasy and reach the kernel of real, the site of dead antagonism, because there you reach a revolution. And when you cross fantasy, desire turn to drive. This is very important. But the gap that Lacan and Zizek speaks is not that like a reactionary idea that you must accept your fantasy because the object of desire is always far, you never reach, is never that. No, I understand, but it's not like this. What you say, that we made revolution, we act in some ghost flies only in the night, so you cannot know before what will happen exactly. No? Lacan say that when you made a real act, when we make a real act, we do this not as a subject. That is subject institution. This something takes you in you. You not, because you cannot control the process. This is what. But the question of the gap is that it's not that we cannot revolutionize. No, you can revolutionize. You can make real acts. You can go to the kernel of the real and change everything. But this structure of desire will be renewed. For example, we make a revolution, Marxist revolution, we reach a communist society, but the structure of desire will be there. Will, in a different way, in a different fantasy, will always have this distance between the empirical object that will get and the sublime object of desire, the cause of desire. This will keep, but this is the structure of desire. This is not this doesn't keep us at distance from revolution. He only see that these are contradictions. These contradictions, this distance from the empirical object of desire and the sublime object, cause of desire, this always will stay, because this is some construction that our psychism have to make us desire. No? Because if we don't construct desires, new desires, we die. We are totally lost. This character, this gap always continue, but this gap doesn't implies that you cannot make revolution. I understand, because there is some reactionary view that why make revolution if you never get that? No, why? No, this is not what Zizek says. No, understand?
Well, thank you so much for laboring an answer to this difficult question. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
A good debate.
Thank you, Professor Prasenjit. We're moving to the next question. So this question is anonymous. You have explained to us the wide range of sources that we can pinpoint where the thought of Slavoj Zizek originates from, like Lacan, even Kant, Marx, and Hegel. And then what is exactly the sources that we can access, that something that we can read to explain more about the origin of these thoughts? Is there some resources that you can recommend for us to pinpoint what exactly the thought of Zizek originates from?
Well, I recommend that you go. There are some good books to introduce Zizek. You have Tony Myers, Rex Butler, you have Adrian Johnston, many books that works as introduction to Zizek. When you go there, certainly Zizek reading will send you to many other books. Of course, Zizek mobilized in his thinking a lot of theories, all the traditional Western philosophy tradition he mobilized in his thinking, Freud and Lacan, a lot of things. It's not few things that, but I think that you start. You can read some introduction to Zizek, some books. There are many. I thought that there are from Tony Myers, Rex Butler, many. And you can start to read Glendale, and you can start to also read the first book of Zizek, the Sublime Object of Ideology. From there, you go to some other sources to understand. Because if you want to, before, really have some domain of all that subjects that Zizek treat, is a lot of things, many philosophers, psychoanalysts, Marxists. So I would start with this Zizek book, The Sublime Object of Ideology. Go there, or you go to, I suggest this Tony Meyer, Zizek, a book of introduction to Zizek. Start there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freire. We can't wait for you to conduct another discussion on his introductory book and even his infamous book, Sublime Object of Ideology, to deep dive even more into the thoughts of Slavoj Zizek. Any other questions before we get into the concluding remarks?
I have a question. Can I, Daniel?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Lalan Baghel. I teach philosophy at Department of Philosophy, Punjab University, Chandigarh. So my question is on tick list subject. Actually, it revolves around the tick list subject, which Žižek is trying to offer one kind of trajectory. While one is thinking about revolution, what is the ontological location of that subjectivity? You'd like to explain. A second question is, one can read Žižek in isolation, but at the same time, one can read Žižek in the context of Santelmove, Judith Butler, and many others. When they try to look at the whole discourse of empty signifier, which Žižek says that when you are in a friendship, there's something called fantasy. But when that friendship converts into the marriage, there's a loss of fantasy. So what you are actually trying to explore, there's nothing to explore. There's something called plateau. So is that revolution is continuous plateau we are looking forward while we are thinking about the idea of revolution from 19th century conceptual framework? Or we have to think about new ways of understanding of revolution or the revolutionary praxis while one is trying to understand Zizek's own account. Zizek has not a very fixed position. He has been continuously revising himself. So what is your own take when we try to look at most of the third world countries, including our India, is controlled by right-wing forces. So all the revolutionaries are in prison. Most of the time, who are not in prison, they are almost in prison. Their freedom is gauged. In that context, where do you find Zizekian framework of revolution fitting to the third world, or you can say the developing world, which are questioning the hegemony of first as well as the middle world or the second world? So I would like to draw your attention. Where do you place the tick list subject and the subjectivity while reading Zizek in context of Santal Mouffe and Judith Butler? Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Well, about first question, well, our reality now, I think it was worse before, no, political speaking. Of course, the neoliberalism is still on the pilot. We are under its command, but in a Zizekian way, I would say that today we are no more in this postmodern contest. We are no more in this neoliberal triumph. No, what I see everywhere is that antagonism. If we think in terms of ideological battles, we can say that today antagonism are growing. Class struggle are appearing again, is becoming visible again. What we couldn't see before 20 years ago, it was total neoliberal triumph. Now we have, they are in power. They are in power, the neoliberals. The communists are in prison. I see this. But anyway, what we are looking, well, Zizek say that the postmodern era is reaching its end, and I understand in this way that antagonism are returning, are becoming visible again, and so the ideological battle is changing. And of course we never know when revolution will happen. No, it's impossible. But anyway, I see that the contradictions are arising, and we can see this now. But how will mobilize to make a revolution? How this will happen? I don't know. Zizek never says exactly this. He don't give a blueprint for this. But ideologically, we are really less entrapped than before. We now start the antagonism are becoming possible to deny, to conceal. But of course, I don't know how far we are for a new situation. Zizek always lament that it's very sad that today the extreme left act as the extreme left today act as revolutionary. They invade the Capitol. They always try to dissolve the status quo. And the left today is like in the position of defending the order. No? I think in every part we have this the neo-fascists trying to dissolve the institution, and the left defending democracy. No, this is our difficult situation today. We don't have more the discourse of revolution, this possibility of disrupt. The right wing hijacked this idea from us. We are in this complicated moment now, because we don't have. Before we had a Marxist project, and we embraced this, and many millions went together to in this, mobilized by this idea. Today we don't have this political project. This is a very big problem, and now the neo-fascists are they appear as the counter-revolutionary. We must change this, but we are not yet in this point. Anyway, the antagonisms are growing and become visible, what before we don't have. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
Okay. So maybe last chance for questions from anyone. I saw that someone raised their hand, but then disappeared. Is there anyone? So, Mr. Freire, while we're waiting for the last question, maybe you can explain to us your trajectory of research, where we can maybe follow and collaborate, whether you are going to more deep dive into Lacanian psychoanalysis or even Zizek's thought.
What I plan from now on, well, from my past, I was a formal professor. After some years, I let drop the job, and since there I'm always studying, by myself. But from now on, what I plan, as I said, I read, study Zizek, Hegel, and Marx since many years. And what I planned for the next year, I want to write a book about Lacanian Marxism. That's all about this that we had talked today. And I want to start. I will start a channel in YouTube that will be called exactly Lacanian Marxism. This is my plan for the next year, and continue to articulate this Lacanian Marxist view that, as I told in the beginning, is part of this long trajectory of Freudo-Marxism, but is a new kind of Freudo-Lacanian Marxism. And so this is my plan for next year. And if someone wants to study Zizek, we can study together. To be I'm always ready and open to do this. Okay. I hope that the presentation was useful to you. I don't know how, if I made myself clear, but I think I said what I want to say.
Yeah, I think you have made yourself clear to us. So, excuse me, Mr. Lalang, do you have a word?
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was amazing, Marcelo, to listen to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we are more than grateful to have you in this evening. Thank you for sharing your extended period of research even though some of us might find it hard to grasp because we are not familiar with this, with the methodology or the background that you elaborate. But I'm optimistic that some of us who are more familiar with this subject are more than satisfied with your presentation. We are looking forward for more collaboration with you, whether it is to deep more into the thought of Slavoj Zizek through his introductory book, or maybe Sublime Object of Ideology, or even the trajectory of your future research about Lacanian Marxism. So, do you have any concluding remarks?
No, it's good. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. And it was very good for me also.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of the members of our community, Marxism Discussion Group would like to thank you very much, Mr. Marcelo Freire, for coming in and for presenting such a huge, tremendous point of researches for us. And then for all the participants, we have some message. Thank you for everyone joining us tonight. We are looking for our next events by Marxism Discussion Group. Okay, thank you. We are looking forward for the next meeting. We are going to discuss it with Mr. Marcelo, whether we are going to continue it with a book or maybe another thought or even another figure in the body of Marxism that is relevant to the trajectory of our discussion group. Thank you very much, everyone. We are going to close this meeting. See you in the next session.
Okay. Bye-bye.